We talked about why it's a good idea to use visual trees in our layout work. And now the next question that you might ask is, how do we actually implement that in any kind of system, or in this case in Unity? Now, unfortunately, we can not only take a picture like here of our visual tree and just throw it into Unity and expect Unity to be able to figure out what we meant by that. So we need some kind of technology, or to be more precise, some kind of language that is able to do that. And the answer here obviously is the UXML language or UXML files, which are able to basically encode our visual tree representation, and it's able to do a little bit more. It can basically put in some properties or attributes on your particular elements and store basically additional information. So what UXML is doing, kind of as an overview, it's storing your visual tree plus adding, if needed, some properties to the respective elements. And I think that's everything you can say from an abstract point of view. To actually really understand that, we have to watch this in action. And so let's just jump into Unity and do just that. So finally, we're in the Unity editor. We can do some actual stuff. And now we are having a brand new UI Builder window here that has nothing on it except I saved it and gave it a name. This is the actual file here in some folder, absolutely nothing fancy here. And now for the next couple of minutes, I would ask you to ignore basically everything that is happening in UI Builder and only focus on three areas that we are going to talk about regarding UXML right now. And this would be, for once, this, oh, I'm sorry, I did not want to do that. Let's just focus on this actual viewport or actual canvas here, on the thing that will happen in the hierarchy here, and on some additional window that I will just show you in a second that will appear down here. That's the only stuff that we are interested for now. Let's not get confused with all the options that UI Builder is actually giving us. Now, where is the UXML file in all of this? Now, you can see our file is basically called .uxml, but what does that actually mean? Now, to see that, what you have to do is you have to expand this little window down here. And the text that you will find here, this is your actual UXML. So it's not very good for a starter, because you have all sorts of kind of meta properties on this here that are absolutely irrelevant for now. We are absolutely not interested in them. But what this is this is basically giving you one element, starting with this UI and ending with this UI. So the way that UXML files are built up, we can see that better when we actually add a real visual element to our canvas here. And now you can see this visual element appears immediately down here, and that is for now the representation of our visual element. So the way that this works is you have those opening braces, and then you have this this forward slash and the closing braces, and this in between is kind of defining your element. Now, this is just half of the truth, actually, because watch what happens when we add a second element. Now, we can find our two elements in here. And now you can see the first element kind of changed a little bit, because now it's closing its braces here, and it has what is called a opening tag, which is the thing on line 2 here, and then it has a closing tag, which is on line 4 here. And that is such that it can actually now represent that it has a child element. And the child element, since it doesn't have any children itself, it can kind of close itself and doesn't need a opening and a closing tag technically it could also be represented in the same way as your as the outer element is. So don't be confused by that. This is all the same representation. Every element in UI Toolkit is represented by one kind of element in your UXML, and one element in your UXML means either you have this opening and self-closing tags, like for this element on line 3, or if you want to represent child-parent relationships, your element is kind of having a opening tag and a closing tag. And the same is true for XML in general. So if you know XML, this is no news for you. And also in HTML, we have a similar structure where we have elements that are self-closing, or we have elements that have specific explicit opening and closing tags. But you can see, as a minimal example, this is basically it. So we have a very small visual tree, which is here in our hierarchy. This is basically our visual tree representation. And this is just saved in the UXML file, as we saw, like here. And like that, you can go on and build basically infinitely complicated layouts that can represent any kind of parent-child relationship. And so if we were to only talk about representing layouts and representing what is a child of what, and kind of encoding your visual tree, we would basically be done, because now I can obviously play around with this. I can add additional elements. Now we can see those two are, you would call those two siblings, because they are kind of on the same level, and you can see this beautifully in the UXML that they actually are on the same level. Now I can again add a child to one of those elements, and you have this, you can play this game infinitely long, and this is basically everything you need to represent your layout. Now obviously that's in 9 of 10 cases, that's not enough for your UI, because what we actually need to tell those elements is how big are they, what color do they have, I don't know, paddings, margins, backgrounds, whatever, and also what kind of element they are. For now, we are only using visual elements. And so this is now the additional information that UXML needs to store. And we will see that when we, for example, want to take this outer element and rename it. Let's call this, I don't know, main container. You can see what happens immediately is is that we get this attribute here on the element that is basically storing, okay, I have this element and I want that its name property or its name attribute is main container. And in this way, you're basically saving all the work that you are doing in UI Builder. You have all sorts of different attributes that you can set here. And now you could start getting into the stuff that you can actually do on this side of the UI Builder. All of those properties, if you would set them, they would appear somewhere in your UXML as attributes and properties. Let's just try that for one example. Let's, for example, say we want to take this inner element and, I don't know, set its background color to something. And you can see when I'm doing those changes, it automatically updates the UXML, and we have this style attribute with background color being set to whatever I set it to. Now at this point you might ask one question. We were talking about the style stuff being actually separated out in our style sheets. So why are we actually putting style properties on our UXML elements? And this is a legitimate question. And technically, you could not use style sheets and just do all of those things. Those things are basically then called inline styles, and do all your styling just through UI Builder in the editor, and store all the stylings in your UXML file. Now, the downside to that is that your stylings then will basically only work for this UXML file that you have. But when we generally work on UI, we tend to find elements that we want to share some styling and that we want to give some, I don't know, they should have the same size, the same colors, the same themes. And you would not be able to do that just with inline styling. So the styling idea is basically a way to give us a more convenient workflow, such that we can separate the styling thing and define it somewhere else, and then reuse it by just throwing it onto elements. And that also keeps our pure layout work a little bit cleaner, because this is then not it's not mixing those two concerns. You are keeping your UXML files for your layout and your structure, and you do your styling in UXML, in your USS files. But in practice, oftentimes it happens, particularly on smaller projects, where this is a little bit intermingled. So you do extract some styling into your USS files, but it's also not a problem to do some basic styling in your UXML. And once you start working on that, you will figure this out. What I just wanted to point out is that technically you can also do all the styling. Everything that you set in UI Builder can be encoded purely in your UXML files, and then you have them you can, I don't know, import them in a different project, send them to someone else, and they will encode all this information. It just has this downside that it's basically only usable for this one file then, and it's not reusable throughout your entire project.